Hi, everyone. Have you heard all this talk about a nuclear renaissance? Like, is it for real this time?
It's definitely getting a lot of buzz.
Yeah, and I want to find out if it's all hype or if there's really something there, you know?
Right.
So we're going on a deep dive into the Range Nuclear Renaissance Index EPF,
Okay.
ticker symbol NUKZ,
NUKZ.
to see if it might be a good investment.
Interesting.
We're going to be going through their summary prospectus, which,
Yeah,
this thing's dense, fair warning.
I can imagine.
But it's packed with some really intriguing details.
Yeah. One thing that jumps out right away is that
Okay.
NUKZ isn't just about like the old school nuclear power plants. It's really targeting companies that are pushing the boundaries.
Yeah.
Driving innovation in the nuclear space.
Like, forget those giant cooling towers, right?
Exactly.
We're talking next-gen nuclear tech.
Yeah.
So maybe for those of us who need a little bit of a refresher, could you break down what exactly is an ETF?
Sure.
And what makes NUKZ in particular unique in this case?
So an ETF stands for Exchange Traded Fund.
Got it.
And it's basically like a pre-built investment portfolio. Instead of picking, each individual stock yourself,
Yeah.
you can buy this basket
Okay.
that holds a whole bunch of companies all focused on one theme.
Right.
And for NUKZ, that theme obviously is the nuclear renaissance.
The nuclear renaissance, yeah.
So you're getting companies involved in everything from advanced reactors to, fuel production and everything in between.
Okay, that's starting to make a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
But how does NUKZ decide which companies go in this basket? Because, there are so many ways to be involved in the nuclear industry, it seems like.
Absolutely. And they lay out in the prospectus exactly how they kind of break it down into these different categories.
Okay.
And they've got 4 main categories.
Okay.
You've got your pure play companies. These are the ones where nuclear is their, bread and butter.
Right.
At least 50% of their revenue has to come from the nuclear sector.
Okay, like the hardcore nuclear companies?
Exactly. Then you have your pre-revenue companies.
Pre-revenue.
Yeah, these are the startups.
Okay.
These are the ones who are still in the lab.
Got it.
They haven't made a dime yet, but they're working on, the nuclear tech of tomorrow.
Ooh, risky.
Very risky, high risk, high reward.
Yeah, those pre-revenue companies, they kind of sound like lottery tickets.
You could say that.
Yeah. But like big payout if they hit it big, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Then you have the diversified companies.
Okay.
These are the ones that, they have a hand in the nuclear game,
Okay.
but it's less than half of their overall business.
So a little bit more stable, potentially.
Potentially, yeah. They're a bit more stable, maybe not growing as rapidly if the nuclear renaissance really takes off.
Right. Makes sense. So we've got kind of like the established players, the high-risk startups, and the kind of companies that have a foot in both worlds.
Yeah.
But wait, there's one more category, right?
Right. The index also includes companies that are really involved in very specific areas of the industry.
Got it.
So we're talking companies that are building advanced reactors, running nuclear utilities, providing construction and services for nuclear power plants.
Oh, wow.
Or even supplying the fuel.
So basically, NUKZ is covering like the entire supply chain of this nuclear renaissance.
Yeah. It's pretty comprehensive.
Wow. This is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now all this talk of cutting-edge companies and pre-revenue startups
Right.
seems really dynamic, but does the ETF just pick a bunch of companies and just stick with them?
That's a great question. And that's actually what makes NUKZ even more interesting.
Okay.
The index is rebalanced twice a year in March and September.
So they're constantly adjusting.
Yeah, they're constantly adjusting the holdings based on how these companies are performing.
Makes sense.
And how the whole nuclear landscape is evolving. And get this, they even include special purpose acquisition companies.
Whoa, SPACs.
Once they've gone public.
Now, for those of us who aren't, Wall Street wizards, could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so think of a SPAC, like a blank check company.
Okay.
That goes public with the sole purpose of merging with a private company.
Got it.
And by merging with them, taking them public in the process.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's like a fast track for these exciting new companies.
Okay.
Maybe even those pre-revenue nuclear startups to get onto the stock market.
Yeah.
And once those SPACs merge and they're trading on their own, they become eligible to be scooped up by NUKZ.
Okay, so that's why it's so dynamic.
Yeah.
It's not just a static list. It's constantly changing and evolving to capture, the best the most promising players in this nuclear space race.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it.
So we've got this basket of companies all focused on the nuclear renaissance, actively managed, constantly evolving.
Yep.
But it can't all be sunshine and roses, right?
Probably not.
So let's talk about risk.
Okay. You're right. It's not all, smooth sailing.
Yeah.
Every investment comes with some level of risk.
Of course.
And NUKZ is, no exception.
Right.
But I think before we dive into all the potential downsides, it's important to understand what's driving this nuclear renaissance in the first place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, what's the potential upside here?
Right. Because if the potential isn't there, then who cares about the risks, really?
Exactly.
So what is the big deal with this whole nuclear renaissance?
Okay.
Is it just hype, or there's something real there?
It's a really interesting time for nuclear, right?
Okay.
Because for decades, it's been seen as, well, kind of a scary thing.
Right.
Accidents, waste disposal, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
But now, with climate change being such an urgent issue and the need for reliable, carbon-free energy sources, there's this growing feeling that maybe nuclear power has been, unfairly demonized.
Okay, so it's not just about, keeping the lights on anymore. It's about, saving the planet.
Exactly. And what's really driving this so-called renaissance are these new advanced reactor designs.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, these aren't the giant hulking power plants of the past,
Right.
These new reactors, they're smaller, they're more efficient. Some are even designed to use existing nuclear waste as fuel.
Whoa, hold on. Using nuclear waste as fuel.
Yeah.
That sounds like something straight out of, a sci-fi movie.
It's pretty wild.
So, if these advanced reactors really live up to all the hype, investing in NUKZ now could be getting in on the ground floor of a major energy revolution.
Potentially, yeah. That's the idea.
Oh, okay.
But we have to be realistic about the risks, too.
Right, of course.
Even with all this potential, there are still some serious concerns about safety and security with nuclear power.
Right.
The prospectus.
Yeah.
It lays out some pretty serious scenarios like accidents, security breaches, even, the threat of terrorism.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
No matter how advanced the technology gets, those are always going to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
But isn't the push for clean energy and the growing awareness of climate change working in nuclear's favor?
It is, absolutely.
Really?
The world needs energy, right?
Yeah.
And it needs it to be clean.
Right.
And nuclear power, it ticks those boxes.
Okay.
Especially compared to fossil fuels.
Right.
But there's also competition from other renewable sources.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Like solar and wind.
Yeah.
They've become way more cost competitive lately.
Yeah.
And a lot of people argue that they're a safer and more sustainable option overall.
Right. So it's not a guaranteed win for nuclear.
Yeah.
It's more like a horse race, it sounds like.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, where nuclear has a shot.
Yeah.
But it's not the only contender.
For sure.
And speaking of contenders, what about risks that are specific to NUKZ itself?
That's a good question.
Besides,
Right. Beyond the general risks of the industry, there are some risks tied to how NUKZ itself operates.
Got it.
Remember we were talking about their methodology for picking the companies?
Yeah.
Well, the prospectus actually calls out something called methodology risk.
Methodology risk.
Yeah, which basically means that there's no guarantee that their strategy for picking those winning companies is actually going to pan out.
So, the risk that the people picking the companies for NUKZ, they might just miss the mark, and the ETF underperforms.
Exactly.
Compared to, the overall market or even other, nuclear-focused investment.
Exactly.
Got it.
It's you could have a great strategy for picking your fantasy football team.
Okay.
But there's always a chance you're going to draft the wrong players.
Right. That's true, yeah.
And there's no way to completely eliminate that risk.
Right.
It's just part of the game.
So even with all the research and the analysis that goes into it, there's still a human element involved.
There is.
And humans aren't always perfect, right?
Exactly. And that's why diversification is so important.
Okay.
NUKZ shouldn't be your only investment.
Right.
It's a good idea to spread your money around.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
Even if it's a nuclear-powered basket.
Even then.
So we've talked about the potential of this nuclear renaissance, the kind of the inherent risks of the industry.
Yeah.
And then the specific risks of how NUKZ picks its investments.
Right.
But what about the cost?
Okay.
What about the cost of investing in this thing?
Good point.
Let's talk fees.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so let's talk about the money part of this whole thing.
Right.
Because even if, this nuclear renaissance really is happening, and NUKZ is like picking all the right companies and everything, it doesn't really matter if the fees are eating up all those profits, right?
You're absolutely right. Costs are a huge factor.
Yeah.
Just like any investment. NUKZ has fees and expenses.
Right.
The main one to keep in mind is the annual management fee, which is currently 0.85%.
0.85%. Okay, can you break that down for me?
Sure.
What does that actually mean for someone who invests in NUKZ?
Okay, so basically it means that for every $10,000 you invest, you're paying $85 a year to the fund managers.
Got it.
For picking the companies, doing the research, managing the ETF.
So it's like a little annual membership fee?
Yeah, you could think of it that way. For access to this basket of, nuclear-focused companies.
That makes sense, yeah.
And the prospectus actually gives an example of how those fees can affect your returns over time.
Okay.
So assuming, a hypothetical 5% return each year, and that 0.85% fee stays the same, a $10,000 investment would cost you $87 in fees.
Okay.
Over 1 year.
Got it.
But if you hold on to it for 3 years, those fees add up to like $271.
So it can start to add up over time.
Exactly. It might not seem like much in the short term.
Right.
But, over the long haul, those fees can really make a dent.
So the takeaway is pay attention to the fees.
Always. Always pay attention to the fees.
Yeah, even though it seems like a tiny little percentage, it can actually make a big difference over time.
For sure.
All right, so we've learned a lot today.
We have.
We've explored what NUKZ is, how it picks its investments, the potential of this nuclear renaissance, all the risks involved, and even, the cost of actually investing in this ETF.
Right.
But I think the big question that a lot of our listeners probably have is this the right investment for them?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And unfortunately, there's no easy answer.
Okay.
It really depends on your own individual circumstances.
Yeah.
Your financial goals.
Right.
How much risk you're comfortable with.
Okay.
And your overall investment strategy.
So it's not just like a buy now while supplies last kind of thing?
Not exactly, no. Investing in a thematic ETF like NUKZ, it's kind of like you're making a bet.
Okay.
You're betting on this specific trend.
Right.
You're saying, I believe in this nuclear renaissance.
Yeah.
And I want to be a part of it.
But with any bet, there's always the chance that, you might lose.
Exactly. There are no guarantees.
No crystal ball, unfortunately.
No.
So before someone decides to, go all in on NUKZ or, frankly, any other thematic ETF, what are some key things that they should think about?
Well, first of all, do your own research.
Okay, yes. Always good advice.
Yeah, don't just take our word for it.
Right.
Or anyone else's for that matter. Read the full prospectus.
Yeah.
Check out the Range ETF website.
Got it.
Maybe even talk to a financial advisor,
Yeah. We're all about, giving you the starting point here.
Exactly.
But you got to dig deeper and make sure you understand the whole picture.
Absolutely.
What else?
Think critically about all the information you come across. Don't just blindly accept what you hear, even from us.
Right.
Challenge the assumptions. Ask your own questions.
Oh.
Come to your own conclusions.
I love that. Be skeptical. Be curious.
Exactly.
Don't be afraid to push back. Ask questions.
Yeah.
Okay, last but not least.
Don't be afraid to make a decision. Investing can feel really intimidating sometimes.
Right.
But once you've done your research, you've weighed the risks and the potential rewards, trust your gut and make a choice.
Okay.
Whether you decide to invest in NUKZ or not. The important thing is that you're making informed decisions.
Right.
About your financial future.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And that's what we're all about here on the Deep Dive.
That's right.
Giving you the knowledge to make those smart decisions.
All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive into NUKZ and this whole nuclear renaissance thing, remember, it's a really fascinating space.
It is.
Potentially game-changing, but it's not without its risks.
Right.
Do your research, weigh the pros and cons, and decide if it's the right move for you.
Absolutely.
And your investment goals.
And even if you decide NUKZ isn't right for you, we hope that this deep dive at least made you curious about thematic ETFs.
Okay.
And the whole idea of, aligning your investments with your beliefs.
Right. Putting your money where your mouth is, kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because who knows what exciting investment themes are going to pop up in the future.
Right. The possibilities are endless.
They really are.
The future is full of possibilities, and knowledge is the key. That's what we always say.
Couldn't agree more.
So keep diving deep, keep asking those questions, and keep exploring.
That's the spirit.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.